1986. Setting the standards with the most extensive schedule in racing. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Bristol, Tennessee. I'm Bob Jenkins, along with Larry Newber for IHRA drag racing. Not regular drag racing, but rather today a special Pro Stock Shootout.
Yeah, it features the Pro Stock cars, which have been really gaining in popularity recently, particularly here in the South. And the nice thing about this, you had to race to get into it. It wasn't by invitation.
Brett Kepner has more from the pit area on what we'll be seeing here this afternoon. Brett?
Nestled in the mountains of northeastern Tennessee is one of the most beautiful and the quickest and fastest drag strips in the country. Bristol International Dragway this afternoon will be playing host to the Hurst Shifter Pro Stock Shootout, a $15,000 to win 8-car extravaganza that will include only the best of the best from the 11-race IHRA Winston National Event Series in 1986. This afternoon, only the drivers who have amassed enough points from qualifying sessions throughout the year will represent their brand during eliminations here in this 8-car field that should indeed present one of the best side-by-side races at IHRA in 1986. Back to you, gentlemen.
Thanks, Brett. The Hurst Pro Stock Shootout being brought to you by Mr. Gasket Company, makers of the world-famous involved in today's activity. Now let's take a look at the drivers. Darrell Alderman, Bob Olson, Bob Glidden, and Billy Ewing. The other four are Ricky Smith, Tim Neighbors, Jim Ruth, and Roy Hill. And we're set for our first contest here this afternoon, and it's going to feature a couple of veterans in drag racing, Bob Glidden against Billy Ewing.
You know, Bob, in a lot of forms of automobile racing, when there's a special race, normally with abbreviated laps involved, preparation is different. It's unique. You have to do something completely unusual to the machine from what you've done all year long. But in drag racing, that's not so. Drag racing is normally geared for those quick bursts of thunder and power. The change has to take place in the driver's head. And that man right there has got to be the man inside of everybody's mind right now. He comes in as the overwhelming favorite, truly.
He is from Whiteland, Indiana, Bob Glidden, and Billy Ewing, his opponent in this round, is from Snellville, Georgia. There you can see Bob doing some burnouts in the far lane and Ewing getting set to go here in the near lane. The cars move up into the staging area, getting set for our first round of eliminations in this Pro Stock Shootout. $15,000 to the winner.
Winner take all. Glidden, of course, in the familiar Thunderbird, and Ewing in the Camaro.
Cars are now inching up to the final light. Glidden's car moving ahead just a little bit. The light goes on, and Glidden shoots out, gets the whole shot. Leads coming down over Billy Ewing, and he takes it by a considerable margin, 192.71, a 729 for Bob Glidden.
Yeah, it started out okay. As a matter of fact, the reaction times, Ewing was .139, that's of a second, and Glidden .107. But at the top end, Glidden and all the preparation that crew has done and the special gearing for that car. Of course, Glidden hitting the gears just right as he moves down the quarter mile. And by the time he got to the final 66 feet, actually 132 feet, which determined the miles per hour, Glidden had a nice, comfortable lead on another 192-mile-an-hour run.
A Kentuckian against a North Carolinian here in our second event, with Jim Ruth from Moorhead, Kentucky, going against the driver of this car, the Budget Machine, driven by Roy Hill.
Of course, the burnout, which you see Roy Hill doing right now, at one time that might have been just for show, but the drivers and crews have found there's a real reason for it. They're actually spinning the tires hard to cleanse them. They lay down the rubber off these tires, and then they back up directly over the tracks that they've just patched down onto the racetrack. And they find it's good for adhesion when it comes time to go when the light turns green.
There's a good look at Jim Ruth, who will be in the far lane for this run against Roy Hill from Sophia, North Carolina, in the Ford Tempo.
Hill is a man who's been around IHRA most of the time since the beginning in its conception. And Hill has had some pretty good runs historically with IHRA. Boy, did he get the jump on Ruth on that one. Did he red light?
Yes, he did. He got too much of a jump. Roy Hill red lights, and Jim Ruth will move into the semifinals. A 190-mile-an-hour run, though, for Ruth.
Yeah, pretty fair country mile-per-hour run for Ruth, 190 miles an hour in a run where he figured he must have assumed that he had this one. He must have noticed the red light because it was pretty obvious.
And there it is, clearly shown. Roy Hill just anticipating a little too much red lighting and losing to Jim Ruth. Next up will be Ricky Smith against Tim Neighbors, and we ask Ricky Smith about Bob Glidden and the streak that he's on right now.
You know, we got to look at reality here. Bob's flying right now, and he's had tire shake the last couple of races. He's lost the first and second round the last 3 races, so all we can do is hope that maybe he has a little tire shake. I don't wish nobody to break anything, but I hate to have to run him.
Well, Ricky may have to worry about Bob Glidden a little bit later. Right now, he has to worry about the Lawrenceville, Georgia competitor, Tim Neighbors.
Again, we've got a situation here where if you go on historical records, you look toward Ricky Smith. Ricky Smith, who won this year's IHRA Winston point standings, accumulating well over 6,600 points. He comes off the line. He's got a real horse race on his hands here, but no, he pulls away at the end of this run.
Well, Tim Neighbors got off the line very quickly, but Ricky Smith won with a 189.47, a ET of 7:46. Now, Tim Neighbors had the better reaction time of .076. Smith had a .102, but Ricky came on to win. Darrell Alderman against Bob Olson coming up here in our next contest in this quarterfinal round. Darrell Alderman hailing from Moorhead, Kentucky against Bob Olson, who is from Illinois, Elgin to be exact, in the outskirts of Chicago. And we asked Bob Olson to comment on the man he'll be competing against in this round, Darrell Alderman.
Well, that's really going to be the only way that we can beat him right now. He's got much more power than we do, and we're just going to have to go for it on the starting line and, you know, hope we get to the finish line first.
Well, we just saw Roy Hill anticipate too much at the starting line. We'll see if Bob Olson does likewise. They get set now to go in this quarterfinal round.
Alderman was second in points this year, so Olson's got to be looking over his shoulder toward Darrell. They both get away. No red light, green lights on both sides of the strip.
And it's Olson with the lead in the far lane, and Bob Olson defeats Darrell Alderman with a 182.92, a 7:58.
Alderman just has not had that good of a weekend, and it continues here in this shootout.
And Larry, their reaction times were identical, .029 for both drivers. Back with more at the Hurst Stock Shootout in Bristol after this. We'll keep you up to date on all the results from drag racing and other forms of motorsports on Speed Week every Thursday at 7:30 here on ESPN. That's Speed Week, 7:30 on Thursday. Well, a surprise, somewhat of a surprise winner in that quarterfinal round of elimination was Bob Olson as he defeated Darrell Alderman. We go down to the pit area and our man Brett Kepner, who is with Bob Olson. Brett?
Bob, obviously it was a tremendous upset, but certainly a great win for the Brubaker-Grebner team.
Yeah, I really didn't expect to win, but, you know, anything can happen. It's the first guy to the finish line that wins. You know, anything can happen.
That's what happened in that situation. Apparently Alderman broke a clutch, and although your 7.58-second run wasn't exactly up there with Glidden, it shows that you're at least in the hunt.
Yeah, we both left real even. It was a good, clean leave by both of us, but I started to lose him out of the side of my eye, and after that, you know, I knew I had it.
Well, obviously, it had to be a great feeling going across the finish line without him in sight.
It was. I usually don't get too excited, but I was excited. You can believe that.
Well, good luck to you in the semifinals. I know you've got Bob Glidden, but hey, you beat him here in the spring.
Yep, anything can happen, and we're just going to give it our best shot.
Olson will be up against Glidden in just a few moments. Right now, we get set for the Jim Ruth against Ricky Smith battle.
Ricky Smith, the man from North Carolina whom you're looking at right now, is first in the season point standings, and Jim Ruth is seventh. Ruth is having an interesting day. He drew a couple of the real favorites, I mean, in his brackets, in his effort to try and get to the finals of this special Hurst Pro Stock Shootout. He defeated Roy Hill the first time out, so it remains to be seen how well he can do against Ricky Smith. At least he doesn't have Glidden to contend with on his side of the bracket.
Remember, though, that he defeated Roy Hill only because Hill red-lighted, so I think we'd probably have to consider Jim Ruth a bit of an underdog again here in this one. We'll see what happens as Ricky Smith brings his Ford Mustang up to the line in the far lane, and Jim Ruth gets set. The green light goes on.
He's in it. Ruth has a chance here. No red lights. They are side by side, wheel to wheel.
But Ruth pulls it out with a 190.67, a 741. So we may be seeing an upset here in the making as Ruth has made his way to the finals.
Certainly among all the 8 people who was here who qualified for this race, Ruth had to be considered one of the dark horses.
Well, let's go down to the finish line where Brett Kepner is with the winner of this match, Jim Ruth.
741 at 190. You're in the final round of the Hurst Shootout.
Oh, real good.
Obviously.
Looking forward to this.
Obviously, with 15 grand on the line, the machine is performing incredibly consistent, and obviously you're going to try and hang with this combination?
Right, we make a few minor adjustments, but we won't change much.
Well, obviously, congratulations. Another 190-mile-an-hour run for the party time team.
Thank you.
So we know one of the contestants in the finals. Now, who will be the other? It'll either be Bob Glidden that you're looking at right now, or Bob Olson from Elgin, Illinois, whom we just heard from a few minutes ago from Brett. There is Bob getting his machine ready to go in the far lane, and Olson in the near lane.
Olson has got to pull a rabbit out of the hat. 10th in points, but Glidden is the man of the hour.
They're getting staged. Each driver inching his car up to the line, waiting for that Christmas tree to click down, and that's a red light for Bob Olson, and Bob Glidden is going to go into the finals.
Yeah, and look at that. Glidden continues to power down us. Another 190-mile-an-hour run. I tell you what, Bob, in a situation like this, Glidden figures to have everybody covered so well that the other drivers are looking to pull the rabbit out of the hat. Take that calculated risk and jump the light. Take a chance at red lighting.
Let's go down to Brett for this conversation with Bob Glidden.
Well, obviously, as I said, a 727 at 191. The car extremely consistent. That's your 5th 720 in a row here.
I need about 6 or 7 more of them, and I'll be in good shape.
Well, you'll be up against Jim Ruth in the party time Trans Am in the final round, kind of an underdog there. Are you looking for just more consistency?
Ruth won the last round, is that right? Well, we'll have to wait and see what happens. Ruth has been running really well. What happened on the prior run with Ricky?
Apparently, Jim just outran him. He ran 741 at 190.
That's a very good run for this time of the day.
Well, obviously, you'll be needing that 720 consistency. Good luck.
You're right, thanks.
It'll be Jim Ruth against Bob Glidden in the finals of the Hurst Pro Stock Shootout. We'll be right back. In Tennessee for the Hurst Pro Stock Shootout, and we are ready for the finals, Glidden against Ruth. But before that, let's take a closer look at a pro stocker as we go to the pit area and Brett Kepner.
The International Hot Rod Association version of Pro Stock Eliminator presents fans across the country with machines that may appear to be street stock versions, but are actually the most technologically advanced class in all of professional drag racing. These machines look to be street stock machines using stock components, but underneath all the fiberglass skin that you see is without a doubt one of the most unbelievable pieces of equipment you will ever see. In International Hot Rod Association Pro Stock Racing, the engine size is unlimited. The only professional class in drag racing that is such, including the engines which measure up to 707 cubic inches of displacement. On top of the engine, you see 2 4-barrel carburetors, each of which take in 1,150 cubic feet of air per minute. Also, you can see the aluminum work underneath the hood, the 2-frame chassis. Down on the front, underneath the one-piece fiberglass front end, you can see not only the custom paint job, but of course, specially designed high-speed Goodyear racing tires, fiberglass doors, Lexan windows, of course, the massive 16-inch wide, 33.5-inch tall Goodyear drag racing slicks. This quarter panel and this roof are the only pieces of original Pontiac Trans Am on the Gary Stewart Pro Stocker. As we come around to the back of the machine, you see the aerodynamic wing, which is designed to place high-speed downforce from the air going over the top of the machine down on the car. It increases the car weight approximately 4 times at 190 miles per hour and keeps the car glued to the ground. Here you see the parachute, an 8-foot wide version that will slow the machine from its 190 mile per hour speeds, plus, of course, the wheelie bars down at the bottom that keep the machine firmly planted on the ground. The interior of one of these 7-second, 190-mile-per-hour monsters is just as exotic as the exterior. The first thing that catches your eye is the funny car-style cocoon-type roll cage designed to protect the driver in any situation. And, of course, the Lengo planetary transmission, in which a lever is used for each gear. This lever in forward actuates first gear. In backwards, it'll back up the car in reverse gear. Going down the racetrack after the driver uses the clutch only to leave the starting line, we pull second gear, then third gear, then fourth gear. Over here, we see, of course, the all-important tachometer, a water temperature gauge, an oil pressure gauge, and this gauge, which actually tells the driver how much brake pressure is being used in the front wheels when he hits this button on the starting line to lock the front wheels and allow him to leave the starting line at full throttle. Up here, the ignition switch, fuel pump switches, cooling fan switch, even a lamp light for the tachometer and other gauges, and, of course, what would a Trans Am be without a radio?
And that is just about all you would ever want to know about a Pro Stocker. And set to go in the finals of our Hurst Shootout here this afternoon is Bob Glidden and Jim Ruth.
$15,000 on the line. Bob Glidden there in the Chief Auto Parts Ford Thunderbird, Mr. Speed in drag racing in 1986, at least in the Pro Stockers. And Jim Ruth running the Party Time Trans Am, GM versus Ford, another one of those classic manufacturer matchups.
Well, it's party time for Jim Ruth, and it'll be even more of a party time if he can pull off the victory here over Bob Glidden. Ruth has defeated Roy Hill because of a red light, and he defeated soundly Ricky Smith, and now he's looking to pull off the upset of the weekend and defeat Bob Glidden. We're getting set to go.
Inching in very, very carefully. A lot of pressure on both drivers.
Light goes on. Oh, and it's a red light for Jim Ruth. He was a little over anxious, and Bob Glidden is going to pick up $15,000 in the shootout.
Bob, it happened very quickly. Again, it was, I think, I'm almost certain it was an on-purpose move that Ruth made. He got to the line and he figured, I don't have any choice but to try and jump this red light, jump this green light, and maybe that will be the way that I can get to victory lane ahead of Bob Glidden. He just miscalculated.
The family runs to greet Bob Glidden. Brett Kepner is also down there to talk with him, the winner of our Hurst Pro Stock Shootout, Bob Glidden.
Bob Glidden pulling around after his opponent Jim Ruth red lights away $15,000 in the final round of the Hurst Pro Stock Shootout. Bob, I don't know if you know it or not, but Ruth fouled on the starting line. You're automatically the winner. Another 729 at 192 puts you $15,000 richer.
That's great. I didn't know Jim red lighted. I thought it was a pretty good leave, and it was a good race through most of the course. Good race.
Well, obviously it didn't matter at that point, and the 7-Eleven Chief team comes through again.
I want to thank the people at 7-Eleven Chief Auto Parts, Ford and Motorcraft, and for this race, I want to thank the people at Hurst who put up the big bucks for us. It's been a good race, and thanks to ESPN for helping us.
From King, North Carolina, the Motorcraft.
Bob Glidden with a 729, a 192.30 wins the Hurst Pro Stock Shootout, and we'll be back with closing comments in a moment.
Racers demand the best. That's why more professional drag racers choose products from the Performance People more than any other.
Absolutely. Our Performance People products are performance proven.
Well, how about some examples of the other Performance People products?
Oh, for instance, 75% of the race cars here are using our Hurst shifters.
And Pro Stock killer Ricky Smith can attest to that.
Yes, my Pro Stocker has a Hurst shifter, and we wouldn't think about running anything else.
But Performance People stands for more than just great shifters.
Our 20 different companies carry everything in high performance.
So if you demand the best, demand Performance People products.
Closing comments going down to the pit area and Brett Kepner.
After 3 of the toughest rounds of competition, Bob Glidden's domination obviously shone through. Despite the red light start by Jim Ruth in the final round, Glidden proved with his 6th consecutive 7.2-second elapsed time that he is head and shoulders above the rest of the Pro Stock field in IHRA mountain-motored Pro Stock racing. 7.2 seconds, 192 miles per hour. These machines are knocking on the 6-second door, race fans. And in 1987 IHRA Pro Stock racing in the next Hurst Pro Stock Shootout should be even wilder.
Well, the Bob Glidden racing operation, very much a family affair, and there is the family portrait.
Bob, as we watch the Gliddens, I also want to comment on the job that Ruth did. He really did an excellent job. He made his way through 2 of the toughest competitors you find anywhere in drag racing, Roy Hill and Ricky Smith. And he got to the finals up against that man, Bob Glidden, and made that move that he felt intellectually he had to make. On the surface, it may have looked like an error, but when you commit something like that and you do it on purpose and it's done from an intellectual mode, it's not an error, it's a really good move. He came into the finals cranking off only 7.4s. Glidden came in with 7.2s. So you can see what Ruth was up against. He sensed that. He took his Kenmore Stone car right as far as he could, but he fell just a little short.
He ran a 192.3, the same as Glidden in the final round, and it hadn't been for the red light, it would have been a real close race.
Yeah, Glidden has held his own all weekend long, and not only has he been good at the top innings, but he's also been good at the bottom end when the race starts. His reaction time was just 1/10 of a second. Pretty fair country time for that, too.
The Hurst Pro Stock Shootout from Bristol, Tennessee has been brought to you by Mr. Gasket Company, makers of the world-famous Hurst shifter. By Drag Review, all you need to know about drag racing. My thanks to Brett Kepner, who worked the pit area, and to Larry Newber here in the broadcast booth. Thank you for joining us. We'll have more IHRA drag racing in 1987. For now, this is Bob Jenkins. So long, everyone.